What is up, everyone? Kevin from Epic Gardening here. We are kicking off a pretty awesome week with another California gardener that I met on Instagram. So this is Brian at Never Enough Dirt on Instagram. Highly recommend you check his feed out. He's actually got some really great Instagram stories where he goes into detail about his garden. First of all, Brian, thanks for coming on. And second of all, can we just talk a little bit about kind of your garden in general first before we get into the ducks?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Kevin. As far as gardening, what I like to do here is try to do a diverse range of gardening techniques and just picking the pros of all that stuff and applying it to our garden. We have a pretty sizable lot, and it allows us to do a lot of things, including having ducks in our garden. So, if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see the different techniques and stuff like that.
Awesome. Cool. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the ducks then. When did you get them? Sort of how do they fit into the overall garden?
I'm relatively new to ducks, so we just crossed our first year with them, and it's something that I've always been curious about for the longest time, coming from having chickens in the past as a teenager. And there's a big gap between having just a garden and no birds. And I wanted to get chickens again, but my wife was really adamant about not having chickens. So we turned to getting ducks, and I was able to, over a few years' time, she wanted me to be really sure, not just get it on a whim. She finally allowed me to get ducks. So we have ducks. And last week with Ann, you guys talked a lot about chickens. That was a really great podcast. The thing for us is that all the pros and cons of ducks and chickens, they're the inverse. So if you have certain things that doesn't allow parameters that prevent you from having chickens, then you may want to look into ducks.
Oh, wow. No way. So when you say inverse, can we go a little bit deeper into that? Because I know some of the pros and cons for chickens would be free fertilizer, of course, for chickens, but then some of the cons is they like to eat just about everything, right? So are you experiencing kind of the opposite of that, or what do you see as the pros and cons of having ducks?
There's ducks are a little bit more easier to manage in terms of getting them away from your plants. They aren't as aggressive as chickens. They not going to fly over things, so you can kind of keep them in their out by having fence that's not too high. I think 4 feet is probably more than enough. So that's one of the huge pros, is that you can kind of keep your ducks in a row, I guess, or out of your garden more easily. Another pro is if you are wanting to keep ducks as your garden pest eaters, you can, like what we're doing, keep a couple male ducks, and they are very quiet. So if you're concerned about, as we are, bringing a lot of noise to the neighborhood, because we have a lot of retirees in our neighborhood, and we have a lot of single income families in our neighborhood. So we wanted to be very considerate and make sure that we try to be as quiet as possible. And if you get male ducks, they are very quiet, and you probably can't even hear them at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good benefit, especially for people like you and I living in the spaces that we do, where it's relatively urban, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially if there are strict city codes about having birds like that. I think they would be a little bit more lenient when you have quieter birds like ducks.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you, let's say I want to get ducks in the garden or build a little duck area, what does that look like in your garden space?
As much as I like to say that they're really cool, I really do want to emphasize that should someone consider ducks, they really need to look into their situation. I think the best possible situation is if you have a large yard where you can let them roam and explore the space and look for their own food. I wouldn't keep them inside an enclosure, because the other side of having ducks is that their manure is really stinky, and the pro is that their manure is very liquid, and the nutrients is quickly available compared to chickens. But at the same time, it can be a strong odor if you don't have enough space to spread that out. And yeah.
Got it. Are you then harvesting and processing the duck waste in any way, or do you kind of just let it fall where it falls and work its way into the garden that way?
A little bit of both. So ducks, they require a nice big pool of water just to keep them happy and to keep them healthy, because they use the water. The water encourages oils from the glands so that they can preen themselves and spread that oil around to keep them weatherproof. So that's another pro of chickens, is that they're weatherproof, so they can withstand snow and everything. And in addition, the water also is another pro where it keeps the mites off. So ducks are pretty low maintenance animals, and they have a tendency to use the pool as a bathroom. So we harvest that water every couple days just to clean it out, and we spread it around our plants.
Oh, that's perfect. And so you kind of have a liquid, relatively bioavailable fertilizer just by cleaning out the pond.
Yeah, that was the huge draw of getting them.
Awesome. Cool. Well, are there any other little tips about ducks that you would want to leave a listener with before we head out onto the next episode tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, the greatest tip is just if you're able to get if you want ducks to help you in the garden, the male ducks are going to be the best. The females, when they get hungry, they're going to squawk a lot, and you're going to want to quiet them by feeding them. But if you let your ducks forage and they get all the grasses and the bugs and the slugs, their manure is not very strong in odor, and you can live with it, and you'll be really happy about having these ducks in your garden.
Brian, I know when I watch your stories on Instagram, you've got what seems like a ton of different things going on, but it's not like you're in a huge rural acreage. So could you talk a little bit about how you're able to squeeze that much yield out of your garden?
Yeah, we're just really fortunate to live in a climate that's really long and allows us to grow things in succession. So what we like to do is grow just enough food for our family, and that allows us to use less space, and through succession we can grow throughout the year. So for instance, instead of growing 16 tomato plants and wondering what to do with it and getting tired of tomatoes, we grow 6 plants and then harvest, and then we, instead of using the other 10 spots that you would use for tomatoes, we may grow some Asian greens, 6 plants of this, 6 plants of that. So we get variety, we're not bored with one thing, and we always have something to harvest and use in the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, I think I try to do the same thing. Sometimes I definitely start more. Like I might still start 12 tomato plants and end up planting maybe 4 of them. And then another thing I'll do, and I don't know if you do this too, is I'll just pick within a plant, like within, let's say, tomatoes, I'll pick an early, middle, and late and just plant them all at the same time. And then I can harvest throughout the season. But once the early one comes out, I can swap that out with something different, but I'm still getting tomatoes because the medium and late are still going.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy, and something that we're trying to, through experimentation, because we have different climates and microclimates, trying that strategy where, like you said, try to pick something that matures early, middle, and late, and then have different types of things, and then have something that's always available from the garden.
Yeah. So are you doing anything with, let's say you've got a bed that's established with perhaps tomatoes, again, going back to that example, and once it's established, are you tossing any other plants in there, doing some intercropping or interplanting?
I'm trying to intercrop some peppers this year to see if we can grow some peppers that grow tall above our bush tomatoes. But yeah, just like you, we have some plants sowed in some starters, and as soon as something's pulled out, we got something going in. And tomatoes is a little bit harder to intercrop them, especially the bush ones, but we have pole tomatoes that we grow single stem, and as they grow taller, the understory, the leaves we remove, and we're going to try to intercrop them with other things like perhaps other nightshades like peppers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and just to go back to what you were saying there, one thing that I like to do, and it sounds like you like to do as well, and for anyone listening, it's definitely takes a little bit more pre-planning, but I'm probably starting seeds at least once a month throughout the growing season. And like you said, Brian, for us, it's pretty long, fortunately, but I think everyone could benefit from this. And actually, if you're in a shorter growing season, you could benefit even more from it because you really want to squeeze out as much as you can. So I always have something that I could put in place if, like even just yesterday, it was really windy here in Southern California, and a couple potato stems just completely got destroyed. And so I'm thinking, okay, well maybe I'll end up waiting a couple days, pulling those potatoes out. I should have something ready to go to pop in there. And fortunately, I've got a nice tomato transplant to put in. But yeah, if you guys can, then starting a lot of seeds and just having something ready to go the instant a plant is spent, let's say a tomato plant or maybe a lettuce is starting to bolt, you go ahead and pull it, you harvest it for salad. If you can keep the cadence really smooth and just put something in right after that, then your yield is just going to go way up instead of waiting and, I need to now direct sow into that bed. If you can just pop a transplant right in, it's a really, really good way to squeeze more out of a shorter growing season.
Yeah, I really want to echo that. And if you're standing above and you're looking at your plot and you can see dirt, you can definitely stick something in there. You don't want to see dirt. You want to see green.
Yeah, totally. And that's from a guy whose Instagram screen name is Never Enough Dirt. So you know that it's true. How has your experience been growing your children up in the garden?
It's been an awesome experience. And one of the perks of being a stay-at-home dad is to be able to spend time with your kids, and even better if you garden, to spend time with them outside.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine it. Like I said, I think in yesterday's episode, I did not grow up in the garden. The only experience I had with a garden as a kid, I think, was 1 week every summer at my great aunt's house. I would run through the garden and we would pick like blackberries and grapes and stuff, but I didn't have that connection, right? Because I had no participation in that garden. I just sort of saw it. And so I'm curious how you kind of have helped your kids or encouraged them to kind of actually take part in the process.
I just remember being a kid and being in the garden with my parents that I wanted to really garden, and that memory is really strong with me. So with my kids, I grow with them and allow them to grow with me, and they've been really excited about all the things we grow. They go out there, they ask to go out there all the time. And that's something that I've gotten a lot of inspiration from other gardeners on Instagram when they share their gardening with kids, and that's something that I like to share and hope to inspire other parents through the stories and on my Instagram, is that children are able to grow a lot of things, and they're amazingly quick at learning. And I have my oldest, who's 4, he's now teaching my youngest, who's 2, how to sow corn seeds. So it's a really good experience, and for them, I'm sure they're having these wonderful memories that's going to last a lifetime for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And you kind of have like a little mini teacher that's helping you out in the garden too. Did you set it up where you've kind of given them an area of the garden to play around in, or do you kind of just let them work in the garden the same way that you would work in the garden?
I'm starting to set up an area for them, and as a gardener, it's hard to remember that it's important to set up an area for them. But we started out by having them sow seeds. So I would either dig a trowel or dig a little hole, and then they throw the seeds in there and they help cover it up, and they get really excited to see it sprout and grow. And
when your kids were growing up, were there foods that they just didn't like? I know as a kid, I hated Brussels sprouts. I hated broccoli. And then I can only imagine that if I had grown the Brussels sprouts or the broccoli, maybe I would have liked it because I have that connection to it. Is that something that you've experienced with your kids, or do they kind of grow up just liking veggies?
We got lucky. They grew up liking veggies. They seek out broccoli and cauliflower, and that's something we hope to be able to grow. It's difficult in California, but yeah, they totally love picking fruit like blueberries and mulberries, and they get excited about fresh food that we put on their plate.
Awesome. Cool. Well, are there any other final tips that you want to leave parents, or I guess would-be parents potentially, for gardening with kids? Anything that you've noticed that kind of really works to get them engaged?
Just start them young. I mean, bring them out in the garden before they're even crawling and have them out there with you. They're going to watch and they're going to get really excited. And if they don't garden, that's fine, because it's probably not in their personality. I was worried with our youngest that he wouldn't be interested because our oldest took into it really quickly. But just go with the flow. If they love it, they love it. Don't force it on them.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's probably like a general rule of parenting, right? Is I remember anything that was forced on me as a kid, I was like, okay, I guess I'll just do the exact opposite of, of what you're telling me to do. So, Brian, what would you say your general approach is to mixing edibles into your landscaping space?
Mine is working with whatever I started the landscaping that I inherited and finding pockets of places where I can put things like sages or other. If I had some steps, I would put some low-growing plants, like for instance some Thai frog eggplants there. But trying to keep it as unobtrusive as possible. Don't want someone walking by and saying, "Hey, there's a garden here." Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately I don't have that luxury because my garden's in the front yard and it's extremely obvious that I have a garden here. But I definitely try to do the same thing. Fortunately, I was able to move into a place that had a loquat tree and had a couple of nice edible shrubs going on, so it's really nice to be able to work with that space. Do you have any tips, I guess? Because it sounds like what you're doing is you came into your home and you looked at the space you had and you worked around that. Is that what you would suggest people to do? And if so, when they're observing their space, what kind of things should they be keeping in mind?
Yeah, it's basically if you don't have a lot of space in the backyard or you have some issues with lighting, and your front yard is your only space and you don't want to particularly grow things in a very stereotypical manner, you can find places in your landscape and stick them in there. Herbs are a great suggestion that I often give people because they're very leafy and they're green and they're shrubby, I guess, and they grow perennially, so you don't have to really maintain them. And you can also use things like Swiss chard, the bright lights, and they add a really nice pop of color to your front yard if you like chard and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I like the idea of growing anything that's relatively perennial and doesn't look extremely edible because, like you said, I mean, in the front yard, I've definitely had issues with people picking stuff. And not that I have a problem with it per se, if they had asked me to do that, but I've definitely had people just wandering on by and grabbing a tomato or a pepper. And at least for me, it's like I know exactly how much effort I put into that, and it makes me sad when someone just steals it without asking. So yeah, I would echo those same tips, and even mixing edible flowers or things like nasturtium, I think is a really good one. Is that something you're growing right now?
Yeah, that's something that we have growing. They're really pretty and they come in so many different types of colors and sizes. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I've been turned on to this variegated nasturtium that you can almost grow as a houseplant. It looks that beautiful and ornamental, but it's, green with these white flecks or splotches, and it looks really amazing. And it's one that I personally am not a huge fan of the flavor on. It has this sort of funky taste to me. I've been working it into some recipes for sure, but definitely one that fits that edible / ornamental and, at least in our climate, relatively perennial plant. You can even eat the flowers. So lots of different options there. Is there anything else that you're working with landscaping-wise that's also edible that you're a big fan of right now?
Right now, I can't think of, I guess mostly eggplants right now because they're pretty low growing and they're pretty cool looking plants. I'm not a big fan of them, but I just like growing them. Yeah. Occasionally I'll cook them up. I have a new space that I'm working on and I trying to grow it in a very organic manner using different types of shapes, planting them in not rows, but like in triangles and in parabolic shapes, and planting things that are not necessarily really, because you had touched on people coming and taking your stuff, like planting things that I wouldn't worry about people taking, because I need the space, like ornamental corn and stuff. Potatoes, it's great for landscaping because they're bushy looking plant and it takes a lot of effort to dig them out, so those are good for outside.
Yeah, and I would say honestly, potatoes, I've seen a couple different people grow potatoes almost as a liner to a patch of dirt, so they'll grow it around the edges of that particular patch or that section of the yard. And most people don't even know it's a potato. I actually had a woman a couple of days ago looking at the garden, and she was like, well, what is all this bushy stuff in these beds? Like, oh, they're potatoes. And she's like, what? I had no idea that was how potato grew. So that's a really good suggestion. The last thing I wanted to ask you before we close out today's show is, why are you planting in the triangle shapes, the parabolic shapes, instead of going in straight rows? Is there a particular reason for that, or do you just like the way that it plays on your space?
Yeah, I like the way it plays on the space, and also it'd be a way to kind of make it not look too like it's a edible garden. I didn't want people walking onto my yard because I don't have it fenced off, and just as an experiment.
What's going on in California as far as the history of citrus and some of the plants that we have that are very prolific here, if you've ever been out here or if you're native to here? So I thought maybe, Brian, we could start off with that history. I would love to know what you have to share about that.
California is a pretty interesting space. It was, as we all know, it's on the western part of the United States, and as the country expanded westward, the climate got more and more deserty. And as you reach California, it's as our sun is really intense. Everything's hot, and the climate doesn't resemble back home where the people came from the eastern side of the United States. So they turned to growing. They wanted California to look very much like home, and they turned to specimens from Australia because Australia has a very similar climate. So they brought over a lot of the eucalyptus trees and a lot of specimens from Australia. So that's, if anybody's been curious about that, all these eucalyptus trees, that's because of that history.
Cool. Yeah, actually, I did not know that, but eucalyptus here, I live close to Balboa Park here in San Diego, and they're just all over the place. It's probably the most predominant tree in the park. So cool to know that. And then how does that tie into citrus, and then how does that tie into your garden? How are you using citrus in the garden?
So when the settlers came and they found that this climate was pretty warm, people were just trying to plant everything that they can to see if it will grow. And citrus is one of the ones that they planted here, and it just took off, and it attributed to the worldwide craze for oranges, the navel oranges that we grow, and we have cities that are named after the oranges. We have Orange County, City of Orange, Riverside, City of Riverside. That's where it all took off. The University of California, Riverside has research on citrus, and they're the citrus forefront researchers. And then as far as your area, Kevin, in San Diego, the Spanish Franciscans who came and founded the mission in San Diego, they had gardens, and they also had early varieties of citruses. They weren't, the modern navel citrus didn't come, wasn't discovered until about the 1850s, and the mission was established around the early 1800s. So they had some form of citrus, but the ones that we all love today came later on to California.
Yeah, and just to echo what you were saying about Orange County, etc., we've got an area of San Diego called Lemon Grove, which is pretty close to the mission, actually. And I think, and I don't know my history as well as you do, but I think that was an area that, it certainly was a lemon grove, but it was bought up by this guy who, I believe he was a really big candy manufacturer, but also was into orchards and was doing a lot of citrus up there. And so it was this sort of elevated area. And he realized that it wasn't the best spot for the lemons because all the water would just run off. And so he transformed it into a community, which is now the community, I believe, of North Park or somewhere around that area. So it's kind of cool to see it all sort of tie together. And then I guess the next question would be, because we have such a storied history of citrus, there's a lot of variety here. And I know I can go to the nursery and grab, I don't even know, 12-ish different types of oranges. So I'm curious what you've got growing on in your space.
I've kind of lost count of the number that we grow here. I'm very much into the history of the citrus, and it all came from China, and the original plant, just citrus in general, they came from there, and just mutations and all that stuff happened to form this current one. But my fascination is with the blood oranges. There's so many types, and um, some of the ones that are not commercially viable, you have to kind of seek out and graft your own. So it's been fun getting into that hobby, I guess, of grafting your own citrus. Other things that I like are citrus from varieties from Japan, like yuzu and suduchi. They all taste really good, and they have their own individual merits.
Yeah, so I've been eyeing Moro blood oranges. I don't know if you're growing those, but those are on my list of eventually when I can grow those, I would love to do that. But what I'm curious about now is you said there's a couple varieties that you're growing that aren't commercially viable and you've had to graft. So first of all, where are you getting them then? And then second, maybe talk us through a little bit of that grafting technique that you're using.
Yeah, absolutely. The budwood is curated through the program that's run by the University of California, and I'm blanking on the name right now.
I'll put it in the podcast description for everyone.
Yeah, so if you're a California resident, you can get the budwood from them, and if you're not a California resident, you'll have to go through a different route. It might be more difficult, but it involves you can grow an orange tree from seed, and then from there, what you want to do is you want to take a little piece of budwood and you just make a splice and you graft it onto there, and you have to wait maybe a couple years, and the tree will start to grow fruit at that point. If you start with a citrus rootstock that you purchase from the nursery, which is a little bit more mature, and you graft on there, you're going to see your results happen a little bit more quickly. But with the way citrus and most fruit trees work, the modern fruit trees work, is you have to basically clone them by grafting it onto a rootstock. You can't just plant something from seed and get the traits back.
Right. And so of the ones that you've grabbed from the university program, what would you say is your number one favorite citrus that you're doing right now?
Right now, my number one favorite is this blood orange called Bahobza blood orange, and we grafted that last year. The tree is forming fruit, and I'm too curious to know how it tastes, so I'm letting it fruit. If I remove the fruit and let it grow another year, it'll probably make more fruit the following year, but I'm just too curious to know. Yeah. So hopefully...
Patience is sometimes hard for us as a gardener.
Yeah.
We could maybe talk a little bit about why even care about heirlooms, right? Because there's definitely a lot of trends in agriculture that are perhaps deleting the demand for heirlooms, certainly if you're buying from a grocery store. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, the way to really enjoy food and to really make use of growing your own is to grow heirloom varieties, because these are varieties that were probably once bred and marketed for taste and flavor. And this is a complete contrast to our modern food industry, which is food that's bred to look big. They're watered down. They don't have a lot of flavor, and they're bred to be able to ship well. So sometimes you give up flavor and quality when you are able to ship long distances and just handle all the throwing and roughing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and I think most of us listening to the podcast will know this because we're at least attempting to grow our own food, is that a lot of the varieties that are grown commercially are grown for reasons other than flavor. And if you're a gardener who's really focused on the kitchen, then heirlooms they don't always taste better, but they can be a really good way to access some pretty unique flavors that are very contrasted from, I guess, what you would normally buy at a grocery store. So I'm curious, I know you have a corn that you really like. Could you describe that one for us?
Yeah, the Golden Bound corn is a pretty old-fashioned corn, and I like it because it has a little bit of chew on it, and that might be something that may bring a nice memory if you happen to grow it for someone who's a little bit older and had that corn when they're growing up, or you can grow it and have a bite and taste and see how maybe grandma enjoyed her corn when she was a kid and growing up.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different varieties of of heirloom corns out there that you could grow them probably until you're dead if you picked a new one every season, and you'd never run out. So a lot of things to experiment with there. And the next one, I'm really curious. Probably tomatoes are one of the plants that most of us are doing an heirloom of one kind or another, and so I'm curious, what are some of your favorites in that category?
Some of my favorites they range from practical to great tasting or great looking. My favorite one is the Black Prince tomato. It's a really nice practical tomato. It slices well. You can use it for paste if you need to, or make salsa. But the one I like to grow year after year and look forward to growing because it makes a really nice big tomato is the Cherokee Purple, and I think that's a fan favorite as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I had Craig LaHoulier on the podcast, who is the one who actually named the Cherokee Purple tomato, which is pretty cool to have him on. He's like a total tomato god. He's got a book called Epic Tomatoes. I would say for me, the one that I think it's the first heirloom I ever grew for tomatoes when I was just getting started out in gardening, and I got it from Baker Creek. It's called Ananas Noir. Are you familiar with that one?
I have not heard of it before. I'm now interested because you mentioned black in it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the thing is, it's not though. I don't know why it's named that. So it's sort of this splotchy, almost like a water. If you mix yellow and red watercolor together and just like threw it on a tomato, that's kind of what it looks like. And it's very large, nice for slicing. I really have no idea why it's called the black. I think it's called the black pineapple. That's like the common name for it. But very, very big. They can get up to about a pound and a half, and just prolific producer. And I didn't really know what I was doing in gardening back then. That was like the first tomato I ever grew, and it was just incredible. So there's one to add to your list. I'll steal the Black Prince from you, and I'm curious now. You've also got a watermelon that you really like that I would love to hear about.
Yeah, this is one that was bred in California for the cooler climate. It's the Klondike Striped Blue Ribbon watermelon, and it is one that is really crispy, really sweet, and really juicy. And I think the key is just to make sure to practice as much organic methods as possible, because you don't want to grow one that's super big. I mean, big watermelons look really nice, but you want to get the one that's a relatively good size so that the flavors and juice and crispiness is concentrated.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. And watermelons, I think I was talking with Joe Lample of Joe Gardener. These big melons and big squashes in my space is something that I haven't been able to focus on as much, because I just would have to say no to too many other plants because they sprawl, right? And even if you grow them vertically, they'll be shading out a lot of different things. And so I haven't been able to experiment with them. I am trying the golden midget, I think it's called. And so we'll see how that one goes. Hopefully I can get a couple out of that. But awesome suggestions. And guys, heirlooms is a world that you could, of course, just go into and never come back, which I would encourage you to try. So if you are growing some conventionals this year, maybe mix it up and grab one showy heirloom and grab one that's supposed to be really good for flavor and just try it out. It's a really, really fun way to connect with a particular plant in a different way. Brian, you had a quote that I really liked, which was harvesting sunlight. And so could you kind of expand on that a little bit and explain what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the universe is just about the energy cycle and just transferring energy from one form to another. And the sun provides a lot of energy. We harvest it for solar energy to use as electricity. Plants use that to grow into things that produce us fruit, and we can use plants to harvest the sun, and we can use them to use as compost or green manure. So in California, we have a lot of the sun energy that we can harvest. So if we plant every space we got with something, we can use something out of it.
Yeah, totally. And so are you then doing green manures anywhere that you have bare dirt that you're not cultivating actual edibles on, or how are you approaching your green manure strategy?
If I have the ability and time to get to every bare dirt, I would try to plant something. But we harvest weeds that we get for our pets, our ducks, and one other pet that we don't mention is our rabbit. He's like a little tiny goat, and he munches on weeds and turns that into manure for us. And we're now getting into cover crops like buckwheat and crimson clover, and just kind of sowing there. And also finding plants that have wheat attributes like artichoke, and they grow very easily here, and they can grow in our clay soil. And if we don't get artichokes out of them, that's fine. We're going to take their dynamic accumulator abilities, and this is this concept where they have deep tap roots that go down to the ground, deeper in the ground than your standard shallow rooted crops, and pull out all the minerals and bring it to the surface. So we chop it and let it break down. We're releasing that energy from the sun and harvesting minerals from the soil to our plants.
Yeah, exactly. And so my friend Steven, he lives over in Lemon Grove, like we were talking about in the citrus episode, and he's been doing the artichokes in his neighbor's lot because his neighbor just basically said, hey, do whatever you want. And so he's doing the perennial artichokes. I don't think he's too stressed either if he gets a lot of artichokes out of them, because he's focused on his market garden. And he's also thrown a bunch of comfrey over there too. I'm curious if you're doing anything with comfrey right now.
I've tried growing comfrey. It's one of the permaculture poster boy plants, and I'm having some trouble with it. I don't know if it's because I'm not spending enough water on them or not, but I did share some plants with my brother, and he has better success with them. So I'm very excited to actually bring them back and probably try to plant them in the understory of my citrus trees and using them there. I found that sorrel is a good alternative. It grows really easily, and I've used chop and drop with sorrel.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah. And would that be categorized as a dynamic accumulator as well? Does it have a really deep taproot? I'm unfamiliar.
Sorrel, I'm not sure that it has a deep taproot.
Got it. Okay, cool. Well, comfrey is certainly a really good one. Artichokes is a unique one. I hadn't thought about using them for the purpose of a dynamic accumulator, but if you have extra space, there's no reason that you can't do that. It makes total sense. As far as other permaculture techniques besides green manure, harvesting sunlight, on your property at least, what type of stuff has worked really well for you?
It's just, I guess it's more of a theoretical thing, which is to view things through the permaculture lens and see the positive thing of things. One example is we often see bugs as plant eaters and stuff, and they're great at breaking down plants and turning it into manure and making that stuff available to plants, even in small amounts. Pill bugs and earwigs. So I try to create places for them to be at, and that's by putting sticks down. They like to hide under there. So where I would like them to be, I put them there. Where I don't like them to be, I keep the place nice and tidy. So things like that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I noticed that, pill bugs and earwigs are all over my, effectively a cold compost pile that I just don't turn that much, and I just sort of let it slowly rot away, and those are the things that are breaking it down instead of the heat of the microbial activity, and works really, really well for that. And then, like you said, there's areas that I don't want them, so I do keep that clean, or I'll plant a cover, or I'll, landscape it in some way, maybe do a bunch of wood chip mulch. Are you using any on-site mulching, or are you bringing in a bunch of wood chips? Like, how are you approaching the mulching of your space, permaculture-wise?
I was lucky enough to be able to get some mulch brought in. I have a very steep driveway that's short, so I can't have it dumped on here. But I was able to get some by bringing it in from a load that my brother received. Other things, we have a large lot, as I mentioned earlier in one of the podcast episodes, and I tend to the plants, so anything that we chop, we try to keep on site. We try to keep as much of it away from the landfills as possible, and we have a little tiny wood chipper that we use sometimes, and a lawnmower helps a lot. But yeah, try to keep as much of our stuff here.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, are there any final tips that you have for someone who's trying to, I guess, approach their garden from a more permaculturist lens, and maybe they haven't done that up to this point? And is there some final tip that we can leave people with?
Yeah, it's just give it time, because it takes a little bit of time to build your ecosystem because we're probably just fighting the bad bugs, but sometimes we need them to attract the good bugs. So give it a couple of years before saying it doesn't work.
Got it. Well, yeah, that's a really good point. And again, going back to patience in the garden, sometimes hard to do, but can be very, very worth it. Certainly when you're building soil or cultivating the soil food web or building your natural ecosystem. All that stuff just simply takes time that's longer than one season often. So awesome. Well, Brian, thanks so much for coming on, man. And is there any way that people can get in touch with you? I know Instagram, and is that it, or is there somewhere else that you'd like people to get in contact with you?
Thanks for having me, first of all. Yeah, for anyone interested, they can contact me through Instagram, or they can email me at brian@neverenoughdirt.com. I also have a YouTube channel, but I'm not able to write responses or get back to messages as easily as email or Instagram.
Got it. Okay, cool. I'm going to put all that in the podcast description. Thank you so much again for coming on, and I hope you guys all enjoyed this week. And again, I would really highly encourage you to just go check out his feed. There's just so much great info. Honestly, in the stories, I just love how you kind of chronicle your day in the garden and you're just dropping knowledge all the time, which is fantastic. So thanks for coming on. I hope you guys enjoyed. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.